Sean Keane had spent 41 years learning that mercy was a currency that bought you nothing but a bullet. As the head of the Keane Syndicate for nearly 15 years, he had perfected the art of invisible power, not with loud displays, but with a phone call, a disappeared witness, or a foreclosed business. He was a man of tailored coats, scarred knuckles, and a heart that had calcified into concrete the night his mother overdosed in a condemned building. But in the winter of 2025, the concrete was beginning to fracture. The first fracture had appeared 2 weeks ago, when he'd driven through Mary Tunney's neighborhood to collect protection money from a corner store. As Sean sat in his blacked-out SUV, he'd watched a young woman, rail-thin, exhausted, share her lunch with a homeless man on the steps of a boarded-up church. Half a sandwich. That was all she had, and she'd given away half. Some people still think the world gives a damn, his lieutenant had muttered. Idiots don't last long here. That night, Sean had looked at his daughter Lily, sleeping in a princess bed in their fortified mansion, and wondered what she would draw if something happened to him. A stick figure with Daddy, written in crayon? Or would she draw the man everyone else saw, the king of the concrete, all sharp edges and shadows? The second fracture came when the coup began. His own blood, his cousin Marcus, had orchestrated the ambush that sent Sean's car careening off a rain-slicked road. As he'd crawled from the wreckage with Lily in his arms, bleeding into the gutter of the very neighborhood he'd been bleeding dry, Sean realized he'd become exactly what his father had been, a man who owned everything but had nowhere safe to fall. And then a woman with nothing opened her door. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm responding to everyone. Click subscribe, like this video. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want me to miss them. Now let's begin. Mary Tunney had learned long ago that survival meant keeping your head down, your door locked, and your questions to yourself. But when a bleeding man collapsed against her fire escape with a child clutched to his chest, every rule she'd lived by evaporated, like steam off summer asphalt. Please. The word came out broken, almost unrecognizable. His face was a mess of blood and rain, but his eyes, those eyes held something Mary recognized from her own mirror. Desperation. The kind that came from having everything to lose. Not me. Just her. Please. The little girl couldn't have been more than 5, wrapped in a pink coat that was now soaked through and splattered with red. She wasn't crying. That's what terrified Mary most. Children were supposed to cry when their world fell apart. This one just stared with dark, hollow eyes that had already seen too much. Mary's hands moved before her mind could catch up, hauling them both through her window and onto the threadbare carpet of her studio apartment. The man was heavy, solid muscle under expensive clothes that were now ruined. She'd never touched fabric that fine in her life. As she lowered him onto her second-hand sofa, the one she'd found on the curb and dragged up 4 flights of stairs, she noticed his watch. It gleamed even in the dim light of her single lamp, probably worth more than 6 months of her rent. Bathroom, she told the little girl, keeping her voice soft. There's towels. Get yourself dry. The child looked to the man, waiting for permission. He managed a nod, and only then did she move, silent as a ghost. Mary had never seen a kid ask permission to get warm. Something was very wrong here, something that went deeper than blood and broken glass. She worked quickly, using her first aid kit, the one she kept stocked because the ER was a luxury she couldn't afford, to clean the gash across his ribs. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, even when she pressed gauze against what should have been an agonizing wound. Men who didn't react to pain were either in shock or accustomed to it. Given the way he'd moved, the way he'd controlled his fall to protect the girl, Mary suspected the latter. You should be in a hospital, she said, taping the bandage down. Can't. His voice was stronger now, clearer. He was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. They'll be watching hospitals, clinics, anywhere official. Who's they? He didn't answer. Instead, he tried to sit up, failed, and finally accepted her help. As she handed him water in a chipped mug, their fingers touched. His hands were scarred, the knuckles thick with old breaks that had healed wrong. Working hands, but not from any honest labor. These were hands that had done violence. Mary stepped back, suddenly aware of how small her apartment was, how flimsy her door. What did you do? Existed. He drank, grimaced, and set the mug down on her milk crate coffee table. That's enough for some people. The little girl emerged from the bathroom, drowning in one of Mary's old t-shirts. She climbed onto the sofa next to the man without a word, tucking herself under his arm like a bird seeking shelter. He pulled her close with a tenderness that didn't match the violence written across his body. What's your name? Mary asked the child. Lily. It was the man who answered. Her name is Lily. Mary's neighbor's television bled through the thin walls. Some late-night drama about cops and criminals. She thought about the sirens that were always screaming through this neighborhood, the blue lights that painted her ceiling at least twice a week. She thought about the dealer 2 floors down, the girls who worked the corner after midnight, the way everyone here had learned to see nothing, hear nothing, know nothing. But this man on her couch wasn't just another casualty of the streets. The way he held himself, the authority in his voice even when he was begging, this was someone who gave orders, not followed them. Someone important. Someone dangerous. "I need a phone," he said. "One they can't trace." Mary's flip phone sat on the counter, a relic from a time when she could barely afford minutes. She handed it to him, watching as he stared at it like an artifact from another era. In his world, she realized, people probably had phones that cost more than her monthly income. He made one call. Short, cryptic. When he hung up, he looked at her with something she hadn't expected. Respect. "You don't know what you've done," he said quietly. "But thank you." Mary looked at Lily, already falling asleep despite everything, and felt her heart crack open. "I know enough." Marcus Keene had never liked getting his hands dirty when technology could do it for him. He sat in the back of the surveillance van, watching the red dot pulse on the screen like a heartbeat that refused to stop. His cousin's heartbeat, the one he'd been paid $2 million to silence. "Still stationary," Vega reported from the driver's seat. The mercenary was ex-military, the kind of man who spoke in clipped sentences and kept his rifle within arm's reach. 4th floor, southeast corner. Been there 47 minutes. Marcus leaned forward, studying the GPS coordinates. The dot had led them on a chase through half the city, erratic, desperate movements that suggested Sean knew he was being hunted. Then the car crash. The signal had gone dark for 12 minutes, while Marcus imagined his cousin bleeding out in a ditch. Problem solved. But the dot had flickered back to life, moving slowly, deliberately, until it stopped in the middle of the Hollows. The Hollows. Of all the places in the city, Sean had dragged himself into the one neighborhood even the Keene syndicate avoided, unless absolutely necessary. Not because it was dangerous. Marcus controlled dangerous. The Hollows was something worse. It was forgotten. A place where people fell through the cracks and stayed there. Where nobody asked questions because nobody cared about the answers. "What's the building?" Marcus asked. Vega pulled up the property records on a second screen. Residential. Low-income housing. Built in 1987, barely up to code. 4 stories, 32 units. High turnover, mostly month-to-month renters. Landlord doesn't live on site. Security. A lock that probably hasn't worked since the 90s, and a door that'll give with one good kick. Vega glanced back. "You want us to move now?" Marcus checked his watch. 2 in the morning. The streets were empty except for the usual shadows. Addicts, prostitutes, people who'd learned not to remember faces. Perfect conditions for a clean sweep. But something made him pause. "Run a thermal scan." Vega typed commands into the laptop. The screen shifted, showing heat signatures in the building. Most apartments were single blobs. One person, asleep, or high, or simply existing. The 4th floor southeast corner showed 3 distinct shapes. 2 large, 1 small. "He's got the kid with him," Vega said unnecessarily. Marcus had known that. The GPS tracker wasn't in Sean's phone or his watch. It was in the silver locket Sean had given Lily for her 5th birthday, the one she never took off. Insurance, Marcus had called it when he'd installed the device 6 months ago. A way to always know where Sean's weakness was. His brother had called him paranoid. His brother was dead now, caught in the crossfire of Marcus's coup. Collateral damage. That's what you called family when they stood between you and 30 million in syndicate assets. "There's someone else," Chen spoke up from the communications station. She was younger than the others, barely 25, but her skill with surveillance tech had earned her a spot on Marcus's crew. The 3rd signature. It's not one of Sean's people. Heat pattern suggests female, approximately 5'4", 110 pounds. She's moving around. Looks like she's cleaning? Marcus frowned. Cleaning? Domestic movements. Kitchen area, now bathroom. She's not standing guard. She's not even near Sean's position. Chen zoomed in on the thermal image. "Sir, I think this is her apartment. I think Sean broke into some random woman's home." That didn't make sense. Sean Keene didn't break into apartments in the Hollows. Sean Keene owned penthouses and lake houses with armed security. Sean Keene had a dozen safe houses scattered across 3 states, places equipped with weapons caches and encrypted communications. Why would he drag himself and his daughter into a stranger's apartment when he had resources, money, connections? Unless he knew those resources were compromised. Unless he knew Marcus had turned every safe house into a trap. "Pull up everything on the apartment's resident," Marcus ordered. Chen's fingers flew across the keyboard. Mary Tunney, 26 years old. Works at Lucky's Diner and stocks shelves at a pharmacy overnight. No criminal record. No connection to the syndicate. No connection to anyone, actually. Parents deceased. No siblings. No significant other. She's nobody. Nobody. That was the point. Sean hadn't chosen this place because it was safe. He'd chosen it because it was invisible. Because men like Marcus didn't look for wolves hiding among sheep. Vega chambered around. Orders? Marcus stared at the pulsing red dot. Sean was wounded, trapped, cornered with a child and a civilian who probably didn't even understand what she'd gotten herself into. This should be simple. Storm the apartment, eliminate the target, retrieve Lily, dispose of the witness. Clean. Efficient. Final. But the Hollows had eyes. Not security cameras. Those had been stripped for copper years ago, but people. The kind of people who'd seen enough death to know when to talk to the wrong cop, the wrong reporter, the wrong crusader looking for a cause. Marcus had built his career on invisibility, on making problems disappear without ripples. We wait, he said finally. Sean's bleeding. He'll need medical attention within 24 hours, or he'll be dead anyway. Let's see if desperation makes him move somewhere less populated. And if he calls for backup? Vega asked. Marcus smiled without warmth. He won't. I made sure of that. Everyone he trusts is either dead or working for me now. He's alone. The red dot pulsed. Alive. For now. Dawn came slowly to the Hollows, gray light seeping through Mary's thin curtains like dirty water. She'd spent the night in the kitchen chair, unable to sleep with a stranger bleeding on her couch, and his daughter curled against him like the world might end if she let go. Every creak of the building, every footstep in the hallway, sent her pulse racing. But nothing came. Just the usual morning sounds. Mrs. Chen's television, Rodriguez's baby crying, someone's alarm clock bleeding through the walls. Sean was awake when she looked over, watching her with eyes that were too alert for a man who should still be unconscious. He'd managed to sit up without waking Lily, one hand resting protectively on the child's back. You should eat, Mary said, keeping her voice low. I've got eggs, bread, not much else. You don't have to. I'm making breakfast anyway. She stood, her back protesting from the awkward angle she'd slept in. Unless you'd rather explain to your daughter why the nice lady who helped you is starving while you both eat. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. People probably didn't talk to him like that. She pulled out her last 4 eggs and the heel of bread, mentally calculating how many shifts she'd need to work before her next paycheck. The eggs were supposed to last through Thursday. What do you do? He asked as she cracked eggs into her only pan. I work. She didn't elaborate. In her experience, men who showed up bleeding at 2 in the morning didn't need her life story. Where? Lucky's Diner, day shift. Pharmacy stockroom, night shift. Sometimes I pick up cleaning work on weekends, if my body can take it. She scrambled the eggs, divided them onto 3 mismatched plates. Before you ask, yes, it's legal. All of it. I wasn't going to ask that. She set a plate in front of him, noticed how he stared at the chipped ceramic like he'd forgotten what normal dishes look like. What were you going to ask? How you survive on that, carefully. She settled back in the kitchen chair with her own plate, the smallest portion. Old habit. Most people here do. We're not surviving, exactly. We're just not dead yet. Sean took a bite, chewed slowly. She'd forgotten butter, couldn't afford it this week, but he didn't complain. This building, your landlord, he ever give you trouble? Depends on your definition of trouble. Heat works half the time, water pressure is a joke, and there's black mold in the bathroom that I keep painting over. But the rent's $400 a month and he doesn't ask questions. That's worth something. $400 for this? Sean glanced around the studio apartment that was barely large enough for her twin bed, the couch, and a strip of counter that pretended to be a kitchen. That's robbery, Mary laughed, a short, bitter sound. That's the Hollows. You pay for what you get, and what you get is a door that locks and a roof that mostly doesn't leak. Better than the street. You've been on the street. It wasn't a question. She wondered how he knew, then remembered the way she'd moved last night. Efficient, no wasted motion. The instincts of someone who'd learned to pack a life into whatever space she could claim. When I was 19, after my mom died and I couldn't make rent on our place, 3 months in shelters and a winter sleeping in bus stations, you learn things. Like how to trust the wrong people. She met his eyes over her plate. Like how to spot the difference between someone who wants to hurt you and someone who's hurting. You came here for your daughter, not for me. That counts for something. Lily stirred then, blinking awake with the disoriented confusion of a child who didn't remember where she was. Mary watched Sean's entire demeanor shift, the hard edges softening as he touched the girl's hair. Morning, princess. You hungry? Lily nodded, still silent. Mary handed over her own plate without thinking. The child looked at it, then at Mary, then at her father. "It's okay," Sean said quietly. "Miss Mary is being kind to us." "You gave me yours," Lily whispered to Mary, her first real words since they'd arrived. "I already ate." The lie came easily, smoothly, the same one Mary had told herself countless times. She'd eat later, she'd make it work. She always did. But Sean was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He broke his portion of bread in half, handed it to his daughter, then pushed the other half toward Mary. "We share. All of us." It was such a small thing, half a piece of bread, but the way he said it, the deliberateness of the gesture, made Mary's throat tighten. She took it because refusing would mean explaining why she always came last in her own life, and that was a conversation she didn't want to have. They ate in silence, the three of them sharing 4 eggs and 1 piece of bread in an apartment that cost too much and offered too little. Sean kept staring at her, and Mary realized he was doing the same calculation she'd done 100 times. How to stretch nothing into something. How to survive on less than what the world said you needed. "You do this every day," he said finally. "Not a question. An observation. Everyone here does. We just don't have a choice about it. And last night, you had a choice. You could have turned us away." Mary thought about that, about the blood and the rain, and the little girl who'd already learned not to cry. "No," she said. "I really couldn't." For the first time since he'd collapsed through her window, Sean Keane smiled. It wasn't much, barely a crack in the armor, but it was real. "I've spent 20 years buying loyalty. You're the first person who just gave it." "I didn't give you loyalty. I gave you eggs." "In my world," Sean said softly, "that's the same thing." Mary came home from her diner shift to find Lily sitting on the floor, drawing with a crayon stub on the back of an old utility bill. Sean was asleep, his breathing deeper now, less labored. 3 days in her apartment and the fever had finally broken. He'd live, probably. Whether that was good news or not, Mary still hadn't decided. The little girl looked up when the door opened, and Mary saw the fear flash across her face before recognition settled in. Always fear first. Mary knew that reflex intimately. "Just me," Mary said softly, setting down her purse. Her feet ached from 8 hours carrying plates, and the smell of fryer grease clung to her like a second skin. "You hungry?" Lily nodded, then glanced at her father. Waiting for permission again. Even when he was unconscious, the child checked. "He needs to sleep," Mary said. "Let's let him rest. You and me, we'll have dinner together." "That okay?" Another nod. The girl had barely spoken since that first morning. Mary wondered what kind of life taught a 5-year-old to be this quiet, this careful. Then she remembered her own childhood and stopped wondering. She pulled out the groceries she'd picked up on the way home. A box of pasta, a can of sauce, marked down because the label was torn. Luxury, by her standards. She usually ate whatever the diner let her take home, food that was about to spoil anyway. But having a child in the apartment changed the math. Children needed real meals, not leftover hash browns and burnt toast. "You know how to boil water?" Mary asked. Lily shook her head. "Want to learn?" The spark of interest in those dark eyes was the first real emotion Mary had seen from her. She pulled a kitchen chair over to the stove, helped Lily climb up, showed her how to fill the pot, how to know when the bubbles meant it was ready. Simple things, things every child should know. Things Mary had taught herself at 7 when her mother was too high to remember children needed feeding. "My daddy doesn't let me near the stove," Lily said quietly, watching the water start to simmer. "He says it's dangerous." "It is dangerous. That's why we're careful." Mary handed her the pasta. "See? You pour it in slow so the water doesn't splash." Lily's hands shook slightly, but she managed it. When the pasta slid into the pot without incident, she turned to Mary with something close to pride. It broke Mary's heart, that look, as if accomplishing a basic task was a victory worth celebrating. They ate at the tiny table Mary had built from milk crates and a board she'd found in an alley. Lily stared at her portion like she was doing calculations. "What is it?" Mary asked. "This is a lot of food. It's 1 bowl of pasta. At home we have..." Lily paused, searching for words. "More. But it's different. Someone makes it. I don't know who. It just appears." Mary twirled spaghetti on her fork. "Well, here you know who made it. Us. We made it together. It tastes better," Lily said seriously. "Why does it taste better when you make it yourself?" "I don't know. Maybe because you appreciate it more." Mary watched the girl eat with the intensity of someone discovering food for the first time. "You eat like this at home? Like someone might take it away?" Lily put down her fork. "Daddy says we always have to be ready. Ready to run, ready to fight, ready to leave everything behind. He says that's what keeps us safe. That's no way for a kid to live." That's what Uncle Seong-jun used to say. Lily's voice dropped. Before he died, Mary glanced at Sean, still asleep on the couch. She wondered how many people had died in his world, how many uncles and cousins and associates had vanished into whatever darkness men like him created. You miss him? He was nice. He taught me to read. Lily picked up her fork again. Daddy doesn't read to me anymore. He says he doesn't have time. He has to work. What kind of work does your daddy do? The child's face shuddered immediately. Whatever innocence Mary had glimpsed disappeared behind a wall of learned secrecy. I'm not supposed to say. It's okay. You don't have to. Mary cleared their plates, noticed Lily had eaten everything. You want to help me wash dishes? They stood at the sink together, Lily on the chair, soap bubbles up to her elbows. The girl laughed when the bubbles stuck to her nose, an actual laugh that rang through the small apartment like a bell. It was the first real sound of joy Mary had heard from her. Sean stirred on the couch. Mary saw him wake, saw the instant panic as he reached for Lily before remembering where he was. Then he saw them at the sink, his daughter covered in soap bubbles and smiling, and something in his face cracked wide open. Daddy, look! Lily held up a plate, triumphant. I cleaned it. He sat up slowly, wincing at the pull of his stitches. I see that, princess. You did good. Miss Mary let me cook too. I poured the pasta and everything. Did you? Sean's voice was rough, but his eyes never left his daughter. Mary realized he was memorizing this moment, filing it away like a man who knew it might not last. That's real grown-up of you. She said at home someone just makes food appear, but here, we make it ourselves and it tastes better because we appreciate it more. Lily said it all in one breath, the way children did when they had something important to share. Does that make sense? Sean looked at Mary then, really looked at her. She saw something in his expression she hadn't seen before. Not gratitude, not attraction. Something deeper, recognition, maybe. As if he'd spent his whole life speaking a language no one understood, and Mary had just responded in the same tongue. Yeah, princess, he said quietly. That makes perfect sense. Later, after Lily fell asleep between them on the couch, Sean spoke into the darkness. She's never done dishes before. Never cooked. Never had to think about where food comes from, or who makes it. Most rich kids don't, Mary said. I gave her everything. Private school, toys, a bedroom bigger than this entire apartment. Thought I was protecting her. He was quiet for a moment. I was just teaching her that nothing matters, because everything's replaceable. She's not damaged. She just needs to learn. You taught her more in one dinner than I've taught her in 5 years. Mary didn't know what to say to that. She listened to Lily breathing, small and steady, and thought about all the things children learned when they had nothing. How to make a meal from scraps. How to appreciate what you had. How to survive. She drew something today, Sean said. While you were gone. Want to see? He handed Mary the utility bill. In crayon, Lily had drawn 3 stick figures holding hands. A man, a woman, and a small girl in the middle. Above them, in careful letters someone had helped her spell. Our family. The misspelling made it worse, somehow. More real. Mary's hands shook as she held the paper. She's never drawn me in a family before, Sean whispered. It was always just her and me. Never. He stopped, cleared his throat. Never anyone else. Mary folded the drawing carefully, set it on the milk crate table. It's just a picture. No, Sean said. It's not. And in the darkness of her $400 apartment, with its black mold and broken heat, Mary realized he was right. It wasn't just a picture. It was a child's wish. And wishes, in her experience, were the most dangerous things in the world. The whispers started on day 5. Mary heard them when she stepped into the hallway to take out the trash. Mrs. Chen and Rodriguez huddled by the stairs, their voices dropping when they saw her. She caught fragments, lack cars, watching, government maybe, or something worse. In the hollows, you learn the difference between regular police and the kind of men who didn't wear badges. Mary. Mrs. Chen grabbed her arm, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman in her 70s. You seeing anything strange? Buildings got people nervous. Strange how? SUVs. Expensive ones. Been circling the block since Tuesday. Don't belong here. The old woman's eyes narrowed. You got new friends we should know about? Mary felt her stomach drop. No. Just me. Same as always. Better be. Rodriguez shifted his baby to his other shoulder. Last thing we need is heat. Building's already on thin ice with the city. Code enforcement starts sniffing around. We're all out on the street. Mary nodded, took her trash bag, and moved past them with the careful neutrality she'd perfected over the years. Don't see anything. Don't know anything. Don't be memorable. But her hands shook as she descended the stairs, and she knew Mrs. Chen noticed. The old woman noticed everything. The dumpster was around back, in the alley where she'd first found Sean and Lily. Mary pushed through the building's rear door and stopped. A black SUV sat at the end of the alley, engine running, windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. Just sitting there, waiting. She forced herself to walk to the dumpster, throw in the bag, turn around. Every instinct screamed at her to run. The SUV didn't move, but she felt eyes tracking her, calculating, measuring. She made it back inside and leaned against the door, heart hammering. Sean was standing when she entered the apartment, which was an improvement. He'd been trying to walk more each day, building back the strength he'd lost. But the moment he saw her face, he went still. "They're here," Mary said. "How close?" "Ellie." "Just watching." She locked the door, knowing how useless that was. "Your people." "No." He moved to the window, stayed to the side where he couldn't be seen from below. "Mine would have already made a move. This is Marcus. He's taking his time, making sure." "Making sure of what?" "That I'm weak enough to kill without complications." Sean let the curtain fall. "He's smart, patient. Everything I trained him to be." Lily looked up from her coloring, picking up on the tension the way children did. "Daddy?" "It's okay, princess. Just talking." But the look he gave Mary said it wasn't okay, would never be okay again. "How long have they been out there?" 3 days, according to my neighbors. Maybe longer." Mary sat down, her legs suddenly unsteady. "People are starting to talk. Starting to look. That's bad here. We survive by being invisible." "I know." Sean ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration that made him look almost human. "I'm sorry. I brought this to your door." "Little late for sorry." Mary heard how harsh that sounded, softened her voice. "What do we do?" "We." He looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "There's no we, Mary. You've done enough, more than enough. When it gets dark, you take whatever cash I have left, and you run. Find a motel across town, lay low for a week. By then it'll be over. And you? I'll handle it. You can barely walk. I fought through worse." Mary stood, moved to the window herself. The SUV was still there, a black stain in the gray afternoon. "They'll kill you. Then what happens to Lily?" The silence stretched too long. When she turned, Sean was looking at his daughter with an expression that made Mary's chest ache. Love and grief, and acceptance, all twisted together. "Marcus won't hurt her," he said finally. "She's family. He'll raise her, give her the life I built. She'll be taken care of. By the man who killed her father." Mary couldn't keep the anger out of her voice. "You think that's taking care of her? It's better than her dying with me. There has to be another way." "There isn't." Sean's voice was flat, final. "This is my world, Mary. It ends in blood. Always has. I was stupid to think I could outrun it." A knock at the door made them both freeze. Not loud, not aggressive, just 3 measured taps. "Mary." A male voice, young, trying for friendly. "It's Dante from 2C. Got a minute?" Dante. The kid who dealt pills out of his apartment, who Mary had watched grow from a scrawny teenager into another Hollows casualty. She'd never spoken more than 2 words to him. "Now's not a good time," she called through the door. "Yeah, I figured." Another pause. "Look, I'm not trying to start anything. Just wanted to say, those cars outside, they're asking questions, offering money for information. People are talking." Mary's blood went cold. What kind of information? About new faces. Strangers. Anyone who doesn't belong. She heard him shift his weight, uncomfortable. $1,000 for anyone who can tell them which apartment you're in. That's real money, Mary. The kind people here don't turn down. How much time do we have? Maybe until morning. Maybe less. Deshaun in 3A's got 2 kids and no job. That's a lot of incentive. Dante's voice dropped. Whatever you're into, whoever you're hiding, you need to move. Tonight. Because by tomorrow, someone's gonna talk. His footsteps retreated down the hall. Mary turned to Sean, saw him already moving, gathering their few belongings with the mechanical efficiency of a man who'd spent his life running. "Where do we go?" she asked. "You said all your safe houses are compromised." "They are." "So where?" Sean stopped, looked at her with something like wonder. "You're still saying we. I asked you a question." He glanced at Lily, who'd abandoned her coloring and was watching them with wide, frightened eyes. Then, back to Mary. "I don't know. I don't have an answer. For the first time in 20 years, I don't have a plan." Mary thought about the SUV in the alley, about Dante's warning, about Mrs. Chen's suspicious questions, and Rodriguez's fear. She thought about $1,000 and how many people in this building would sell them out without hesitation, because survival meant not having the luxury of loyalty. "Then we make one," she said. "Together." Vernon Hayes had been a landlord for 32 years. And in that time he'd learned that principals were expensive luxuries that men like him couldn't afford. So when the two men in expensive suits showed up at his door in Queens with an envelope full of cash and questions about his tenants, he didn't hesitate long. "Fourth floor," he said, pocketing the $5,000 without counting it. 4B. Mary Tunney's place. The taller one, Marcus, he'd said his name was, smiled without warmth. "How long have they been there?" 5, maybe 6 days. "Heard her bring someone up Tuesday night, late. Thought maybe she finally got herself a boyfriend." Vernon shrugged. "Didn't ask. None of my business what tenants do as long as rent gets paid." "She mention anything? Say where they came from?" "Mary don't talk. Keeps her head down. Pays on time. That's all I care about." Vernon shifted uncomfortably. The men were still standing in his doorway, and something about the way they looked at him made his skin crawl. "That all you need?" "Almost." Marcus pulled out his phone, showed Vernon a photo. A man with hard eyes and a child on his shoulders, both of them smiling at some fancy restaurant. "That's who she's hiding?" Vernon squinted at the screen. Could have been. He hadn't gotten a good look Tuesday night, had only glimpsed shadows through the cracked door when he'd gone up to fix Mrs. Chen's radiator. "Maybe. Like I said, I don't ask questions." "Smart man." Marcus pocketed the phone. "One more thing. That building of yours, how many exits?" "Front door, fire escape in back. Windows if you're desperate enough." "Security system?" Vernon laughed. "You seen the neighborhood? I got a lock that barely works, and prayers." "That's it." "Good." Marcus nodded to his companion, who'd been silent this whole time. The second man had the look of someone who'd done violence professionally, efficiently. "We'll handle it from here. You don't remember this conversation." "What conversation?" Vernon closed the door, listened to their footsteps fade down his front steps. He looked at the envelope on his counter, thicker than any month's rent from that whole building. $5,000 for pointing at an apartment. Easiest money he'd ever made. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stay away from the building tonight. Don't go back until tomorrow afternoon." Vernon stared at the message, felt something cold settle in his stomach. He thought about Mary Tunney. Always polite, always on time with rent, even when he knew she was choosing between food and heat. Thought about whoever she was hiding, and what kind of men paid $5,000 just to know where someone slept. He deleted the text, poured himself a whiskey, and turned on the television loud enough to drown out his conscience. In 32 years of being a landlord, he'd learned something else too. You couldn't afford principals, but you also couldn't afford to think too hard about what happened after you sold them. By tomorrow afternoon the money would still be in his pocket, and whatever happened at 4B would be someone else's problem. Sean was helping Lily pack her few belongings when the locket caught the light. She'd taken it off to wash her face, left it on the edge of Mary's sink. The silver glinted under the fluorescent bulb, and something about it nagged at him. He'd given her that locket for her birthday 6 months ago. Had it custom made by a jeweler in Manhattan who didn't ask questions about clients who paid in cash. 6 months ago. Right around the time Marcus had started making his move. His hands moved before his thoughts caught up, picking up the delicate chain. The locket was heavier than he remembered. Not much, just a fraction of an ounce, but enough. Enough to matter. "No," he whispered. He pried it open with his thumbnail. Inside was the photo he'd placed there, Lily and her mother, taken before cancer had stolen his wife and left him raising a daughter in a world of blood and bullets. But there was something else. A chip, barely the size of a grain of rice, embedded in the backing, where no one would think to look. GPS tracker. Military grade, the kind Marcus had bragged about acquiring from a contact in private security. Real-time location data, accurate to within 3 feet. Battery life of 2 years. Sean's vision went white at the edges. He'd led them here. Every step of the way, every moment he'd thought he was running, hiding, protecting his daughter, he'd been broadcasting their location like a beacon. The car crash hadn't been the beginning. Marcus had known where they were going before Sean did. Had probably orchestrated the whole thing, waited for the perfect moment to strike. And Sean had run straight to Mary's door with a tracking device around his daughter's neck. "Daddy?" Lily appeared in the doorway, her voice small. "What's wrong?" He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The locket dangled from his fingers, innocent and lethal. How many times had he kissed Lily goodnight and touched that necklace, never knowing? How many safe houses had been compromised because he'd insisted she never take it off? Mary emerged from the bedroom, saw his face, and went still. "Sean," he held up the locket wordlessly. It took her a moment to understand, but when she did, the color drained from her face. "How long?" she asked. "Since her birthday, March." He forced the words out through a throat that felt lined with broken glass. "I gave it to her myself. Told her it was from her mother, that she should never take it off. And all this time, they've been watching. Not just watching, waiting." Sean crushed the locket in his fist. Marcus knew I'd run eventually, knew I'd try to disappear. So he made sure I couldn't. He just had to be patient, let me think I was getting away, then closed the trap when I was at my weakest. Mary moved to the window, careful not to be seen. The black SUV was still there, engine idling. That's why they haven't rushed us. They know exactly where we are. They're just deciding when to move. They're waiting for dark. Sean set the locket on the counter like it might explode. Fewer witnesses. Easier cleanup. Marcus always preferred night work. We could leave now. Right now. Before. They're watching every exit. He heard the defeat in his own voice. Hated it. Front door. Fire escape. Probably have someone in the building by now. We move. They move. We're boxed in. Mary was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady in a way that made Sean's chest ache. This isn't your fault. I brought them to your door. I put that locket on my daughter's neck and led killers straight to the one person who... He stopped, swallowed hard. You gave us everything. And I repaid you by painting a target on your back. You didn't know. I should have known. I built my entire empire on paranoia and contingencies. But with Lily I got sloppy. Sentimental. He looked at his daughter, who was watching them with frightened eyes that understood too much. I wanted her to have something from her mother. Something beautiful. And Marcus turned it into a leash. Mary crossed the room, picked up the locket, examined the tracker with the clinical detachment of someone assessing a problem. Can we destroy it? Make them think we moved? They'll know the second the signal goes dead. It'll just accelerate their timeline. What if we put it on someone else? Send it somewhere. Sean had already considered that. Run through every scenario. They're too close. They've got eyes on the building. They'll see it's a decoy before it gets a block away. So we're trapped. You're not. He grabbed her shoulders, made her look at him. You walk out that door right now. Tell them I forced you to hide us, that you were scared. They'll believe you. Marcus knows this neighborhood. He knows people like you don't get involved in my world by choice. People like me, good people. Honest people. People who work 2 jobs and share their last meal with strangers. His voice cracked. You don't belong in this, Mary. You never did. And I'm so goddamn sorry I dragged you into it. Mary pulled away from him, and for a moment, Sean thought she was going to take his offer, run, save herself. Instead, she went to Lily, knelt down to the child's level. Lily, baby, I need you to give me your locket. Can you do that? Lily looked at her father. Sean wanted to tell her no, to hold on to the last piece of her mother. But he nodded. The girl unclasped the chain, handed it over. Mary closed her fingers around it, and Sean saw the tremor in her hands that she was trying to hide. If we're going to die here, Mary said quietly, I'd rather do it knowing I tried to save a little girl than knowing I ran to save myself. You don't understand what you're saying. I understand perfectly. She met his eyes, and he saw steel there he hadn't noticed before. The kind that came from surviving when the world wanted you dead. You've been running your whole life, Sean. Maybe it's time we stop. They came at 11, when the building had settled into its restless sleep. Mary heard them first, the creak of the front door lock giving way, then silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of held breath, of men moving with purpose through darkness. She'd grown up in places like this, knew every sound a building made, and which sounds meant danger. They're inside, she whispered. Sean was already moving, his injuries forgotten, as survival instinct took over. He'd barricaded the door with her dresser an hour ago, but they both knew it would buy seconds at most. He had Mary's kitchen knife, her only weapon, gripped in his right hand. Against trained killers with guns, it was laughable. The crawl space, he said to Lily, who was already awake, already terrified. Just like we practiced. Mary had shown them earlier, a loose floorboard in the corner behind the bed, opening to a narrow gap between floors. Barely big enough for a child. Lily slid in without argument, and Mary replaced the board, dragged the bed back over it. If they were thorough, they'd find her. But thorough took time. Footsteps in the stairwell now. Heavy boots, multiple sets. Mary counted at least 3, maybe 4. The fire escape, she said suddenly. It's a trap. They'll have someone. Not the escape, the ladder. She grabbed his arm, pulled him to the window. It's rusted through on the 4th floor. Hasn't been maintained in 10 years. Put weight on it, the whole thing separates from the building. Sean looked at her, understanding dawning. They won't know that. Nobody knows but the tenants. And we don't tell the landlord, because then he'd have to fix it and raise the rent. She opened the window as quietly as possible. The night air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust. You get out onto the platform. Make noise. Make them think we're running. What about you? I know this building. They don't. She pulled him close, surprised by her own boldness. Trust me. The dresser exploded inward as they kicked the door. No warning, no negotiation. Just violence. Mary ran for the bathroom as Sean dove through the window onto the fire escape. She heard shouting, the crack of gunfire, the metallic groan of rusted bolts. The bathroom had a second door that opened to the hallway, a relic of when these apartments had been laid out differently. Most tenants had sealed theirs shut. Mary had kept hers accessible because sometimes you needed an exit. She slipped through, found herself in the hallway as 3 men rushed into her apartment. The 4th was at the stairs, guarding their exit. He turned when he heard her door open, raised his weapon. Mary threw herself sideways into Mrs. Chen's apartment. The old woman never locked her door. Bad hip, slow to move in emergencies. Figured she'd rather let help in fast than keep it out. Mary crashed through, rolled, came up next to the television that was always playing. What in the... Mrs. Chen started. Stay down, Mary hissed. The gunman appeared in the doorway. Mary grabbed the old woman's teapot from the stove, still hot from her evening routine, and hurled it. Boiling water and ceramic exploded across the man's face. His scream brought the others running. Mary was already moving, back into the hallway, to the stairs. She knew these stairs. Knew the 3rd step on the 2nd floor landing was split, would collapse under sudden weight. Knew the railing on the 1st floor was loose, would give way if you leaned on it. A hand grabbed her shoulder. She spun, drove her elbow up and back the way she'd learned when she was 19, and living rough. Connected with something soft. Heard a grunt. Kept running. Behind her, chaos. Sean's voice, roaring. The fire escape giving way with a shriek of tearing metal. Someone screaming. More gunfire, the sound impossibly loud in the enclosed stairwell. Mary hit the 2nd floor landing, felt hands grabbing her from behind. She went limp, let her weight drop. The attacker stumbled, his foot coming down on the split step. The wood gave way with a crack. He went down hard, his weapon clattering away into the darkness. Rodriguez appeared in his doorway, baby in his arms. His eyes went wide. Mary didn't stop, couldn't stop. She could hear footsteps above her, behind her, closing in. The front door burst open. Marcus Keene stood silhouetted in the entrance, gun raised, and Mary realized she'd run straight into the trap. There was nowhere left to go. No clever building tricks. No knowledge of layout that would save her now. She raised her hands, breath coming in ragged gasps. Where's my cousin? Marcus asked quietly. Right here. Sean dropped from the 2nd floor landing, all his weight and momentum driving Marcus into the ground. They hit hard, rolled, came apart. Sean's knife flashed. Marcus's gun went off, the muzzle flash blinding in the dim hallway. Mary couldn't see who was hit. Couldn't see anything but 2 men fighting to the death while residents peered from doorways. Rodriguez was calling 911. Mrs. Chen was shouting in Chinese. And somewhere above them, Lily was hidden in a crawlspace waiting for a father who might not survive the next 30 seconds. Sean came up on top, the knife at Marcus's throat. Blood ran down his side. He'd been hit, but not fatally. Not yet. You made me lead you to her, Sean said, his voice raw. You turned my daughter into bait. Used her to get to me. It's just business, Marcus gasped. Nothing personal. Everything's personal. Sean pressed the blade deeper. You want my empire. Take it. It's built on blood anyway. But you don't touch them. Not Mary. Not Lily. Never. You think you can negotiate? You're dying. We're all dying. Sean looked up at Mary, still standing on the stairs. But some of us get to choose what we die for. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The Hollows didn't get fast police response, but enough gunfire would bring them eventually. Marcus's remaining men had scattered, smart enough to know when an operation had gone sideways. Mary descended the stairs slowly, her legs shaking. She knelt beside Sean, pressed her hands against the wound in his side. You're gonna be okay. Probably not. He smiled, and there was blood on his teeth. But I tried. That's something. That's everything, Mary said, and held him while they waited for the sirens to arrive. Sean Keene spent 3 weeks in the hospital under federal protection, and in that time he made more phone calls than he had in the previous 3 years. Not to lieutenants or enforcers, or the men who'd built his empire on fear. To accountants, lawyers. The kind of people who understood that real power didn't come from a gun but from knowing where the money flowed and how to redirect it. Marcus was in custody, singing to prosecutors about syndicate operations in exchange for a lighter sentence. The cousin who'd tried to kill him was now the prosecution's star witness. Sean found that poetic in a way that would have made his father furious. The rest of the organization fractured predictably. Some fled. Some tried to consolidate power. Sean let them fight over scraps, while he dismantled the machine from the inside, turning over evidence, freezing accounts, burning bridges he'd spent 20 years building. The feds didn't trust him, they shouldn't, but they couldn't ignore what he was offering. Names, locations, operations that would make careers and fill prisons. He did it all from a hospital bed, with Lily coloring at his side, and Mary visiting every evening after her shifts. "You're destroying everything," she said on the fourth week, sitting in the uncomfortable plastic chair that had become hers. "Your whole empire." "I'm destroying a cancer." Sean adjusted the IV in his arm, winced at the pull of healing stitches. "Should have done it years ago. Before it killed my brother. Before it made my daughter wear a tracking device. Before it brought killers to your door. And after, when it's all gone. After, I spend the rest of my life trying to deserve what you did for us." Mary shook her head. "I didn't do anything special. Just basic human decency. That's the most special thing in the world." 6 months later, Mary came home to find her landlord waiting in the hallway with an envelope. Not Vernon. He'd sold the building and disappeared. A new landlord, professional. Legitimate. "Miss Tunney, we've completed the renovations. New heating system, updated plumbing, mold remediation, security system with cameras at all entrances." The woman smiled. "Your rent remains at $400 a month as guaranteed in your new lease. Locked in for 10 years. Mary stared at the envelope containing keys to an apartment she barely recognized. "I don't understand." The building was purchased by the Keene Foundation. They're renovating properties throughout the neighborhood. Your building was first. The landlord hesitated. "Mr. Keene left a note for you." The note was brief, written in Sean's precise hand. "You taught me that sanctuary isn't a place. It's a choice. Now the whole neighborhood gets to make that choice. Thank you for showing a monster how to be human." Mary walked through her apartment. Same layout, same view, but transformed. New appliances. Fresh paint. Windows that actually sealed. The floorboard where Lily had hidden was gone, replaced with solid hardwood. As if erasing the night they'd almost died. But on the kitchen counter sat a framed drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands. A man, a woman, a child. Our family in crayon letters. Mary picked it up, traced the misspelled word with her finger. Outside her window, the hollows looked different in the fading light. Cleaner. Safer. The black SUVs were gone, replaced by construction trucks and workers installing streetlights that actually functioned. Sean had taken his empire of blood and violence and transformed it into something else. Not redemption. He was too smart to think money could buy that, but a foundation. Literally and figuratively. The Hollows would never be paradise, but it might become a place where people like Mary didn't have to choose between food and heat. Where children could grow up without learning to fear every knock at the door. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Lily starts school next week. Real school, not the private kind. She asked if you'd come to her first day. Would mean a lot. To both of us." Mary looked at the drawing, at the neighborhood transforming outside her window, at the life she'd almost lost for the crime of basic human kindness. She thought about a wounded man in her doorway, a silent child in a pink coat, and the choice that had changed everything. She texted back, "I'll be there." Some foundations, she'd learned, were built on concrete and steel. Others were built on a shared meal, a hidden child, and the decision to open your door when the world told you to look away. Both kinds could hold up a building, but only one could hold up a life. Thanks for watching. Please like, comments, and subscribe.